Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I rise to speak in opposition to the Chambliss substitute amendment and to ask my colleagues to think about this substitute in a pretty significant way because it dramatically changes the underlying bill. In fact, I almost want to ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle if they are serious. If they're serious that this is the proposal that they are going to put before us in response to the catastrophe that we have seen on Wall Street. I know we've been on the floor and we've had a lot of history with this starting in 2001, and I remember, I think it must have been 2002 or 2003 when we tried to regulate derivatives then after the Enron crisis, and one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle literally said, we can't regulate derivatives, we don't know enough about them. And so what lessons have we learned since this catastrophe? Well, I can tell you this, we were wrong to say that we can't understand derivatives because our lack of misunderstanding or not paying attention has led us to the catastrophe that we are in today. And for the other side of the aisle to say we can't even propose exchange trading, that's like saying the stock market should make changes in options and stock without being on an exchange. That'd be like the president and I swapping back and forth Microsoft or Starbucks stock and selling it to other people and having none of the trades basically being reported. Now, why would we tolerate that for the stock market, and yet we're saying somehow it's okay for derivatives, this product that has become this unbelievable $600 trillion market, to operate in the dark, and the other side doesn't even want to have exchange trading? I can't believe that. I can't believe that somebody would even propose that. Now, I know some people are going to say that they have clearing, but the clearing requirements of this legislation only cover 60% of, would leave 60% of the market uncovered. So we're talking about not having the product on exchange and not having a lot of it cleared. So the two primary principles of learning the mistakes of the last 10 years are basically going unnoticed, unaccounted for on the other side of the aisle. But let's go back to how we got into this situation, because we used to have a law that basically said, yes, let's protect consumers. And we had transparency in trades, that was reporting to the CFTC. We had on the books capital requirements. We had speculation limits. We had anti-fraud and anti-manipulation laws. We had trader licensing and registration and public exchange trading. So yes, we actually had it right. We had it right. We had some tools in place. We had an oversight agency that was supposed to do this job. All of these things that protected the investments of millions of people and made the functionality of people who legitimately had to hedge, like farmers or airline industries, rules of the road so they weren't taken to the cleaners or the price wasn't artificially driven through the roof. But what happened to these things? Well, what happened to these things is in 2000, somebody came out here on the Senate floor and in the basically 7:30 on a Friday night, stuck into a over 2,000-page bill, a little exemption that said, don't regulate these derivatives. That's what happened. And what happened in the marketplace is that derivatives were really a very small business, only a few $100 billion, as you can see in 1999. It was kind of an uninteresting little market. But we ended up deregulating them, and since then, in this short period of time, it turned into a $700 trillion market. Now, how do you go from that period of time to this $700 trillion? You go because we made it a dark market. We basically said you don't have to have the rules of the road or the regulation or the oversight or the basic things that make this a functioning market. And so what happened? Well, we had no transparency, no requirements to keep records. That means you didn't have to be able to prove to the CFTC exactly what you were doing in the market. That way, you couldn't actually prove fraud because you didn't know what anybody was doing because no one had to keep records. It's like Bernie Madoff on steroids. We had no large trader reporting and no speculation limits. The reason why you have things on an exchange is because when an exchange sees that somebody is making the market or too large of a position, and oftentimes across several exchanges, you have a regulator who can come in and say, you know what, we have speculation limits, and you can't do that much trading because you were driving the market. So after that, we had no speculation limits, we had no capital requirements, and we had this high risk of manipulation and excessive speculation. So that's what we did. And a lot of people thought, well, you know what, I wasn't here, but I know a lot of people said, you know, this is going to revolutionize things. Derivatives are going to be the wave of the future. It's going to help us in our financial markets and the amount of liquidity. Everything's going to be great. Some people said, don't worry about this. Don't worry about this because they aren't going to be a very big resource, and they're going to be very small. And it's only going to be a few people that are going to trade back and forth, and don't worry about it. Well, I just showed you the chart. It turned into a $700 trillion industry. And it was a big opportunity for people to make a lot of money without the oversight. So now where are we today? Have we learned the lessons of this catastrophe? Have we? It's not to say that it isn't hard to be ahead of the smartest guys on Wall Street. I will say, Mr. President, it's very hard. That's why you have to have bright lines, because otherwise people do come up with new tools. I saw it with Enron in my state. I've seen it now with derivatives. There'll be something else. And unless we have rules of the road, then there will be people who will try to continue to have opaque markets and drive trading. But our underlying proposal by the chair of the Agriculture Committee and this underlying bill working with the chair of the Banking Committee has the rules of the road. The other side of the aisle is proposing a substitute that would take those away. This is clear. If you have unregulated trading, none of these things happen. If you have exchange trading, this is what the American public gets protected with: transparent pricing, real-time trade monitoring, transparent valuation, speculation limits, and public transparency. That's what this underlying bill does, and that's what the amendment is trying to get rid of. They want this to be blank over here. They want this to be blank. They don't want those things to have to be met. Now, how could you possibly propose that after what we just went through? You had prior to 2000 regulation, things were working fine. You have afterwards a major catastrophe, and these are fundamentals that we have behind all of our markets and exchange trading. So why would you let one thing off the hook? I'll never forget the day that one of the former CFTC staff came and testified before the Energy Committee and said to our committee, do you know that hamburger in America has more regulation on it than energy futures? And I thought he couldn't be serious, but he was right. Futures of beef have reporting requirements, had to have transparency and real-time monitoring, have speculation limits. But these energy derivatives, because they were exempted by this 2000 Act, didn't. So somehow we were saying that hamburger in America and making sure it played by the rules was more important than whether oil or electricity or these other things, as we know, CDOs, played by the same rules. So make no mistake, this underlying bill gives us this kind of predictability and certainty in the tried and true ways that markets function, with transparency. And we're talking about old-fashioned capitalism here. We're not talking about oligarchies where people hide behind things and only a few people. You know, who knows when we're going to find out what happened with the fat finger the other day and what moved the market. But I know this: if you come back to capital trades with transparency and pricing and real-time monitoring and those speculation limits, their legislation on the other side does nothing to make sure that we prohibit the excessive speculation that can move the market in a manipulative way. So, Mr. President, I hope that we do not adopt this substitute amendment. Let's show America we are serious about the kind of transparency that has worked in markets and are tried and true parts of our capitalist system. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.